The space station called Meridian's Edge floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was a place where no single species held power, a neutral ground. Today, ships from 12 different civilizations had gathered here. Their leaders came to talk about trade routes through a dangerous region of space called the Veil Nebula. The main hall of the station was massive. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, each one designed to produce light comfortable for different alien eyes. Long tables held food and drinks from dozens of worlds. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowd. Some walked on two legs, others floated. A few crawled on many limbs. Among them stood the Velkari delegation. They were tall beings, almost 3 meters in height. Their skin glowed with soft blue light from within. Their eyes were large and silver, without pupils. They moved with the easy confidence of a species that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Princess Usalara led her delegation. She was young for her kind, only 300 years old, but she carried herself like she owned every room she entered. Her gown was made from woven starlight, a material so expensive that most species had never seen it. Jewels from conquered worlds decorated her long fingers. She looked at the other species with barely hidden disgust. The Cenari with their insect bodies, the Kralith with their 4 arms and warrior culture, the Orvani who breathed methane and needed special suits to survive here. All of them were beneath her. All of them knew it. But one group annoyed her more than the others: the humans. Humanity had only discovered faster than light travel 30 years ago. They were bobbies in the galactic community, children who had barely learned to walk among the stars. Yet here they were, at the most important diplomatic gathering in a decade. It was insulting. The human delegation was small, just 5 people. Their ambassador was a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She smiled too much and tried too hard to be friendly. Usalara had already dismissed her as weak. But there was one human who caught her attention, not because he was impressive, because he was so completely ordinary. He stood in the corner of the hall away from the crowds, a man in his 50s with short gray hair and a face full of old scars. He wore a simple military uniform, dark blue with few decorations. His eyes were tired, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and slept too little. He held a drink but never sipped from it. He just watched. Usalara learned his name from her advisor, Sergeant Major Marcus Cole, a military attaché, basically a bodyguard for the real diplomats. She forgot about him immediately. He was not worth remembering. The first 2 days of the summit went poorly. The Velkari wanted control of the main path through the Veil Nebula. This would give them power over all trade in the region. The other species objected, but none dared to argue too strongly. The Velkari had the largest fleet, the oldest technology, the most powerful weapons. On the second evening, a small incident occurred. A human staff member accidentally stepped on the robe of a Velkari noble. The noble screamed in outrage. He demanded punishment. The situation threatened to become a diplomatic crisis. The human ambassador was busy with other matters. Someone needed to apologize formally. The man in the corner stepped forward. Marcus Cole walked to the center of the room. Every eye turned to him. He seemed not to notice. He approached the angry noble and bowed his head slightly. "On behalf of my people, I apologize for this accident," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. "We meant no disrespect to you or your honored garment." The noble huffed but seemed satisfied. The crisis was avoided. But Princess Usalara saw an opportunity, a chance to remind everyone of humanity's place. "How touching," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "The primitives send their common laborers to grovel before their betters." A few of her attendants laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel. Cole looked at her. His face showed nothing. "Tell me, human," Usalara continued, walking closer to him. She towered over him by more than a meter. "Does your species always send broken old men to represent them? Or were all your young warriors too frightened to come? More laughter from her group. Your Highness, Cole said simply, I am just a soldier, I go where I am sent. A soldier, Asalara's lips curled into a smile. You look more like a farmer to me, a short-lived primitive playing at civilization. She turned to the crowd. This is what humanity offers the galaxy, aging servants with dirt under their fingernails. Cole said nothing. He simply nodded, turned, and walked back to his corner. Asalara laughed at his retreat. She expected the room to join her amusement. But something strange happened. The other delegates did not laugh. Many of them had gone very still. The Cenari ambassador, an ancient being named Thelios, was staring at Cole with an expression that looked almost like fear. The Kralith warlord had set down his drink. His 4 hands were clenched into fists. Asalara noticed none of this. She was too pleased with herself. Across the room, Ambassador Thelios moved quietly to a terminal. His many legs clicked softly on the floor. He began searching through classified files. Files that most species kept locked away. Files about the early days of human expansion into space. He found what he was looking for. His compound eyes widened. He read the name again, Marcus Cole. Thelios had lived for 600 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed wars that burned across entire star systems. Very few things frightened him anymore. But as he read the file on the tired old human in the corner, Ambassador Thelios felt something cold settle in his chest. Something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. He looked at Princess Asalara, laughing with her attendants, so proud of her clever insults. She had no idea at all. Thelios closed the file and began moving through the crowd. He needed to speak with the other senior delegates. They needed to know who was standing quietly in the corner of the room. They needed to know what Princess Asalara had just done. Ambassador Thelios found the Kralith warlord first. His name was Gorath, and he commanded 12 battle fleets. The Kralith were a warrior species. They respected strength above all else. They feared nothing. Or so Thelios had believed. I need to show you something, Thelios said quietly, about the human, the one the princess insulted. Gorath made a dismissive sound. What about him? He looked like a servant, weak, soft. Thelios said nothing. He simply transferred a file to Gorath's personal device. The Kralith warlord opened it with annoyance. He expected to see nothing important. Instead, he saw a name, a date, a location. His 4 eyes went wide. The color drained from his gray skin. This cannot be correct, he whispered. This must be a different human. They all look similar. I checked 3 times, Thelios replied. It is him, Marcus Cole, the same one. Gorath looked across the room at the quiet man in the corner. The man who was calmly watching the party, showing no reaction to the insults he had received. The warlord, who had killed enemies with his bare hands, who had led armies into battle, took an involuntary step backward. Does the princess know? He asked. The Velkhari archives are incomplete, Thelios said. They did not think humans were important enough to study closely. She knows nothing. Within an hour, every senior delegate except the Velkhari had seen the file. They gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed voices. They kept looking at Marcus Cole. Some looked at him with fear, others with something close to awe. A few simply looked confused, unable to believe that the tired old man could be what the files claimed. The Orvani delegate, speaking through a translator device, asked the question everyone was thinking. How is this possible? He looks so ordinary. That is what makes humans dangerous, Thelios replied. You cannot tell which ones are ordinary and which ones are him. The story spread through whispered conversations, fragments of history that most species preferred to forget. A war that happened 15 years ago in the early days of human space travel. The hegemony of Dracorath. Most of the younger delegates had never heard the name, but the older ones remembered. The Drakkarath were a species of conquerors. They had ruled 60 star systems. Their military was legendary. 1,000,000 ships, billions of soldiers. They had never lost a war in their entire history. When they discovered humanity, they saw easy prey. A young species, weak technology, limited territory. The Drakkarath sent a war fleet to take Earth's colonies. They expected the humans to surrender immediately. The humans did not surrender. Earth's colony on Titan was the first target. It was a small moon with mining operations and civilian shelters. The Drakkarath fleet arrived with overwhelming force. They destroyed the human defense stations in hours. They landed ground troops to capture the survivors. Marcus Cole was 25 years old then, a young sergeant in the Earth Defense Force. His battalion was assigned to protect the civilian shelters. They were outnumbered 50-1. The battle lasted 3 days. The Drakkarath pushed forward with endless waves of soldiers. The humans fell back again and again. Cole's battalion took heavy losses, then terrible losses, then catastrophic losses. On the 3rd day, a Drakkarath heavy cruiser bombarded the main civilian shelter. 6,000 people died in seconds. Among them was Cole's wife. Among them was his daughter. She was 7 years old. Something changed in Marcus Cole that day. The other survivors saw it in his eyes, a light going out, or perhaps a different kind of light turning on. He gathered the 7 soldiers still alive from his unit. He told them his plan. It was insane. It was suicide. They agreed immediately. The Drakkarath flagship hung in orbit above Titan. It was called the Eternal Victory, 3 kilometers long, crew of 15,000. The personal vessel of Admiral Kethril, the greatest military commander the Drakkarath had ever produced. Cole and his 7 soldiers stole a damaged shuttle. They flew it directly at the flagship. The Drakkarath did not bother to shoot them down. What could 8 humans do against a ship that size? What happened next became classified at the highest levels of every intelligence agency in known space. The records showed that Cole and his team entered the ship through a damaged hull section. They fought their way through corridor after corridor. The Drakkarath were physically larger, stronger, and better armed. It did not matter. One by one, Cole's soldiers fell, but they kept moving forward, always forward. Cole reached the bridge alone. He was wounded in 7 places. He had run out of ammunition for his rifle hours ago. He was carrying a Drakkarath blade he had taken from a dead enemy. Admiral Kethril had 15 of his best guards around him. They were elite warriors, each one capable of killing 100 ordinary soldiers. Cole killed them all. It took him 4 minutes. Then he stood before the Admiral, the greatest military mind of the Drakkarath hegemony, a being who had conquered 12 civilizations. "Your fleet is still intact," the Admiral said. "My soldiers still control Titan. Killing me changes nothing." Cole did not answer with words. He walked to the ship's communication system. He broadcast a message to every Drakkarath vessel in the system. His face appeared on 1,000 screens. He was covered in blood. Most of it was not his own. "I have killed your admiral," he said. His voice was calm and flat. "I have killed his guards. I am coming for all of you now, every ship, every soldier, every officer." He paused. "You touched our worlds. You killed our children. There is no place in this universe where you can hide from what comes next." He ended the transmission. Then he went to work. The classified files showed that Cole spent 18 more hours on the Eternal Victory. He moved through the ship deck by deck. The Drakkarath sent hundreds of soldiers to stop him. They failed. Surveillance footage, recovered years later, showed scenes that the delegates could barely watch. By the time Cole left the ship, it was a tomb. But that was only the beginning. The message Cole sent had been heard by the Drakkarath homeworld, and humanity had heard it too. Within a month, Earth sent everything they had, every ship, every soldier, every weapon they could build. Within a year, the Dracorath hegemony no longer existed. 60 star systems, 1,000,000 ships, billions of soldiers, gone. Their homeworld still burned. No one went there anymore. It was considered cursed ground. And standing quietly in the corner of the diplomatic reception, watching the party with tired eyes, was the man who had started it all. The Kralith warlord finished reading the file. He looked at Princess Usalara, still laughing with her attendants, still so proud of herself. She called him a broken old man, Gorath said softly. She called him weak. Thelios nodded slowly. Yes, she did. Should we tell her? The old Senari thought for a long moment. Part of him wanted to let the princess learn the truth on her own. It would be fitting punishment for her arrogance. But this was a diplomatic summit. Things could go wrong very quickly. We should tell someone, Thelios finally said, before she does something even more foolish. But before either of them could move, Princess Usalara was already walking back toward Marcus Cole. She had more insults to deliver, more humiliation to inflict. Neither Thelios nor Gorath moved fast enough to stop her. The third day of the summit began with tension in the air. The negotiations had reached a critical point. The Velkhari continued to demand complete control of the Vale Nebula's main transit corridor. If they won this demand, they would control trade for hundreds of star systems. Every species would have to pay them for the right to move goods through space. Princess Usalara stood before the assembly with absolute confidence. Her delegation had prepared for months. They had studied the weaknesses of every other species. They knew exactly which threats to make and which promises to offer. The Velkhari Dominion has protected this region for 10,000 years, she announced. We have kept the peace. We have maintained order. It is only right that we control the pathways that our ancestors discovered. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Velkhari definition of keeping the peace usually meant making everyone afraid to fight back. The Orvani delegate raised an objection. The corridor passed near their territory. They wanted shared access. Usalara dismissed the concern with a wave of her glowing hand. The Orvani may apply for transit permits like everyone else. We will be fair in our pricing. The Senari delegate, Old Thelios, tried a different approach. Perhaps a council of multiple species could oversee the corridor, a shared responsibility. Shared responsibility means no responsibility, Usalara replied smoothly. The Velkhari do not share power. We exercise it for the benefit of all. Then the human ambassador spoke up. The Earth Coalition cannot agree to this proposal, she said calmly. Giving any single species control over a major trade route creates an imbalance of power. We suggest that the corridor remain neutral territory, open to all. Usalara's silver eyes narrowed. She had been irritated by the humans since they arrived. Their presence at this summit was an insult. Their objection was unforgivable. The humans dare to lecture us about power, she asked, her voice rising. Your species was burning fossil fuels and fighting wars over dirt while my ancestors mapped these stars. You have been in space for 1 generation. We have been here for 400 generations. The human ambassador remained calm. The age of a species does not determine the wisdom of its policies. Something dark flickered across Usalara's face. She stepped away from her speaking position and walked toward the human delegation. Her attendants followed, sensing their princess was about to make a statement. Let me explain something to you primitives, Usalara said. You are here because we allow it. You exist because we have not yet decided you are worth the effort of removing. Do not test our patience. The hall fell silent. This was beyond normal diplomatic insults. This was a threat. The human ambassador started to respond, but Usalara was not finished. Her eyes found Marcus Cole, still standing in his corner, still watching with those tired eyes. And you, she said, pointing at him. I see you lurking there like a frightened animal. Is this the best humanity can offer? A species of prey animals who send their broken remnants to do the work of proper soldiers. Cole met her gaze but said nothing. Acelara walked closer to him. She was enjoying herself now. Every eye in the room was on her, watching her demonstrate Velkhari superiority. I have studied your history, she continued. One lucky victory against the Drakkarath and you think you are warriors, but we know the truth. It was a fluke, a desperate act by desperate animals. You won because the Drakkarath underestimated you. We will not make the same mistake. She stood directly in front of Cole now, looking down at him from her greater height. Look at you, she said with disgust. Old, scarred, tired, you are a relic of that fluke. Proof that humans send their broken tools to represent them, because they have nothing better to offer. The silence in the hall was absolute. No one moved, no one breathed. Across the room, Ambassador Thelios closed his compound eyes. He could not watch what was about to happen. The Kralith warlord had his hand on his weapon, though he was not sure why. Marcus Cole looked up at the princess. For a long moment he simply studied her face, her glowing skin, her silver eyes, her absolute certainty that she was the most powerful being in the room. Then he spoke. Your Highness, he said quietly, I have spent 15 years trying to forget what I am, trying to be the broken old man you see, trying to deserve peace. His voice was soft, but somehow it carried to every corner of the vast hall. You want to know about the Drakkarath? Let me tell you something that is not in your history files, something that was classified by every species that witnessed it. He paused, his eyes never left hers. I stood in the throne room of the Drakkarath God Emperor. His name was Vethkar the Eternal. He had ruled for 600 years. He had conquered more worlds than your dominion has ever touched. The princess's smile began to fade. He was surrounded by his personal guard, 200 of their greatest warriors, and his children, 12 heirs to the hegemony. Cole's voice remained calm, flat, as if he were discussing the weather. I killed the guards first. It took time. They were skilled, but I had stopped caring whether I lived or died. That makes a difference. No one in the hall moved. When I reached Vethkar, he did not beg for his own life. He knew that was already over. He begged me to spare his children. He offered me worlds, star systems, anything I wanted. Just let his children live. Cole's eyes were empty, windows into something vast and dark. I thought about my daughter. She was 7 years old. She liked to draw pictures of flowers. The last thing she drew was a picture of our family, me, her mother, and her. She never finished it. The princess took a small step backward. She could not help herself. The Drakkarath killed her along with 6,000 others when they bombed the shelter. So when their God Emperor begged me to spare his children. Cole paused. I did not. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Now you call me broken, Cole continued. You are right. Something in me did break that day. But broken things can still cut, Your Highness. They cut deeper than whole things ever could. He turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. At the door, he stopped and looked back, not at the princess, at the room full of diplomats who had treated humanity as a minor annoyance. I have not done violence in 15 years, he said. I have worked very hard to become the tired old man you see, but that man can go away. He is just a mask I wear because the alternative frightens me more than it frightens you. He looked at Princess Acelara one last time. Please do not make me take off the mask. Then he was gone. The princess stood frozen in place. Around her, she slowly became aware of the other delegates. They were not looking at her with respect or admiration. They were looking at her with pity and fear, but the fear was not for her. It was fear of what she had almost unleashed. Ambassador Thelios finally moved. He walked to the princess on his many legs. his ancient eyes filled with something she had never seen directed at her before. Disappointment. "You should have asked us about him before you spoke," he said quietly. "We would have warned you." "Warn me about what?" Asalara demanded, but her voice shook slightly. "He is just one human, one old, broken human." The Kralith warlord Gareth stepped forward. His voice was grim. "In my culture, we have a term for beings like Marcus Cole. We call them extinction events, forces of nature that end civilizations." He shook his head. "The Dracarith were older than the Velkhari. They were stronger. They were smarter. And one broken old human ended them forever." He looked toward the door where Cole had disappeared. "You insulted him in front of the entire galactic Concord. You called his species prey animals and primitives. You threatened to remove humanity from existence." Gareth leaned closer to the princess. "Pray to whatever gods the Velkhari worship, that he does not take you seriously." For the first time in 300 years, Princess Asalara did not know what to say. Princess Asalara returned to her private quarters in a daze. Her attendants followed in nervous silence. None of them had ever seen their princess shaken before. The Velkhari were supposed to be above such emotions. They were the masters of the galaxy. They feared nothing. But something had changed in that hall, something fundamental. "Leave me," Asalara commanded. Her voice was not as steady as she wanted it to be. The attendants hurried away. Only her intelligence advisor remained. His name was Thuron, and he had served her family for centuries. "I want everything," Asalara said. "Every file, every record, every piece of information about that human and what happened to the Dracorith." Thuron hesitated. "Your Highness, our archives on humanity are limited. We did not consider them worthy of detailed study." "Then access other databases, the Sonari, the Kralith, anyone who has information. I need to understand what just happened." The advisor bowed and began working at his terminal. It took him 3 hours to compile a complete file. When he finished, his hands were trembling. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "perhaps you should not read this before sleeping. The contents are disturbing." Asalara grabbed the data pad from his hands. "Go, now." Alone in her quarters, she began to read. The file started with standard biographical information. Marcus Cole, born on Earth, joined the military at 18, married at 22. One daughter born when he was 24, normal career progression. Good soldier, nothing remarkable. Then came the Dracorith invasion. Asalara read the tactical reports from the Siege of Titan. The humans had been completely outmatched. Their weapons were primitive compared to Dracorith technology. Their ships were slower, weaker, and fewer. By every measure of military science, they should have surrendered within hours. They did not surrender. The reports described how human soldiers fought until their weapons were empty, then fought with knives, then fought with their bare hands. They died in waves, but they never stopped. The Dracorith commanders had never seen anything like it. A note from a Dracorith general, recovered after the war, stood out. He had written, "These creatures do not fight like rational beings. They fight like something that has decided death is acceptable. How do you defeat an enemy who does not care if they live?" Asalara kept reading. She found the classified footage from the Eternal Victory. Someone had managed to recover surveillance recordings from the destroyed flagship. Most species had locked these files away. They were considered too disturbing for public viewing. Asalara watched anyway. She saw Marcus Cole enter the ship through a hole in the hull. 7 soldiers were with him. They were wounded, exhausted, and low on ammunition. They faced a corridor full of Dracorith warriors. The Dracorith were physically superior in every way, taller, stronger. Their armor could stop most human weapons. Their claws could tear through steel. Cole's team killed them all. It was not clean. It was not elegant. It was brutal, desperate, and absolute. The humans used guns until they ran out of bullets, then used knives until the knives broke, then used their hands and teeth and anything they could find. One by one, Cole's soldiers fell, but each death seemed to make Cole move faster, fight harder. His face in the footage showed nothing. No fear, no anger, no pain, just empty determination. Asalara watched him reach the bridge. 15 elite Dracorath guards stood between him and the Admiral. Cole was alone. He had a single Dracorath blade taken from an enemy he had killed hours ago. He was wounded in 7 places. Blood dripped from his arms. He killed all 15 guards in 4 minutes. The princess had trained with blade masters since she was a child. She understood combat at the highest levels. What she saw in that footage was beyond anything she had ever witnessed. Cole did not fight like a soldier. He did not fight like a warrior. He fought like a force of nature, like gravity, like the cold void of space. Unstoppable, uncaring, absolute. After the Admiral died, Cole broadcast his message to the Dracorath fleet. Asalara watched it 3 times. Each time she noticed something new: the blood on his face, the steadiness of his hands, the complete absence of emotion in his voice. This was not a man who had won a victory. This was a man who had become something else entirely. The file continued with records of what happened after. Cole did not leave the Eternal Victory after killing the Admiral. He spent 18 more hours aboard the ship. He moved through every deck, every corridor, every room. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found no survivors. 15,000 Dracorath crew members, all dead. The footage from those 18 hours was incomplete. Most cameras had been destroyed during the fighting, but the fragments that remained were enough. Asalara watched until she could not watch anymore. Then she sat in the darkness, trying to understand what she had seen. The psychological assessments came next. Every major species had tried to analyze Marcus Cole after the war. Their conclusions were similar. The Sonari report described him as a localized extinction event in humanoid form. They recommended that no Sonari vessel should approach human space without explicit permission. The Kralith military analysis was shorter. Do not engage under any circumstances. If engaged, surrender immediately. If surrender is not accepted, pray. The Orvani scientific evaluation attempted to understand Cole's physiology. Humans were not particularly strong or fast or resilient. They were average in almost every biological measure. The Orvani could not explain how a human had done what Cole had done. Their conclusion was troubling. Either this individual represents a statistical outlier of impossible magnitude, or we fundamentally misunderstand what humans are capable of. The final entry in the file was a note from Velkari Intelligence. It had been added years ago, but never flagged as important. Subject: human military capabilities. Assessment: minimal threat. Recommendation: no further study required. Asalara stared at those words for a long time. Her people had dismissed humanity. They had assumed that because humans were young and technologically inferior, they were not dangerous. They had made the same mistake the Dracorath made. She thought about what she had said in the diplomatic hall, the insults, the threats, the casual cruelty she had directed at Cole and his entire species. She had called him broken, weak, a remnant of a lucky victory. She had called humanity prey animals. She had suggested that the Velkari might decide to remove them from existence. And the man she said these things to had personally destroyed the Dracorath hegemony. He had walked through a flagship killing machine by machine. He had ended a civilization that was older and more powerful than her own. The Dracorath God Emperor had begged Cole to spare his children. Cole had not. For the first time in her long life, Princess Asalara understood what real fear felt like. Not fear of death. Death was simple. She feared something worse. She feared what might happen if humanity decided that the Velkari were like the Dracorath. If they decided that her insults deserved the same response that the bombing of that shelter had received. Cole had said he had not done violence in 15 years. He had said he wore the mask of a tired old man because the alternative frightened even him. He had asked her not to make him take off the mask. Acelara sat alone in her quarters until dawn. She did not sleep. She could not. When the station's artificial sun began its cycle, she made a decision. It was not easy. Her pride screamed against it. Everything she had been taught about Velkhari superiority rejected it. But she had seen the footage. She had read the files. She understood now what none of her teachers had ever told her. There were beings in this galaxy that should not be provoked, not because they were powerful in the ways she understood, not because they had better weapons or larger fleets, but because when you pushed them past a certain point, they stopped being people and became something else, something that would not stop, something that could not be reasoned with or defeated. Princess Acelara needed to find Marcus Cole. She needed to apologize. Not because it was right, not because she felt guilty, but because she was terrified of what would happen if she did not. And that terror, she realized, might be the wisest thing she had ever felt. Princess Acelara found him on the observation deck. The station had several such areas, but this one was the quietest. It faced away from the busy shipping lanes, toward the deep black of empty space. Only the distant stars provided light. Marcus Cole stood at the window. His hands were clasped behind his back. He seemed smaller in the dim light, more ordinary, just a tired man looking at the stars. Acelara almost turned back. Her pride demanded it. Velkhari royalty did not apologize. They did not seek out those they had insulted. They certainly did not admit they were wrong. But she kept walking. Her footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Cole did not turn around. "I wondered if you would come," he said quietly. Acelara stopped a few meters away. She had prepared a speech, carefully worded, diplomatically appropriate. But standing here in the darkness with this man who had destroyed empires, all her prepared words seemed foolish. "I read your file," she said instead, "the complete one." Cole was silent for a moment. That must have been unpleasant. "It was," she paused. "I did not know about any of it. My advisors never considered humanity worth studying." Most species made that assumption. His voice held no anger, no accusation, just simple fact. Acelara moved to stand beside him at the window. She was taller than him by more than a meter. Yesterday, that had made her feel superior. Today, it meant nothing. "I need to say something," she began. "And I need you to understand that it does not come easily. My people do not apologize. In our culture, admitting error is seen as weakness." Cole finally turned to look at her. His eyes were calm, sad perhaps, but calm. "Then do not apologize," he said. "Just say what you came to say." Acelara took a breath. "I spoke from ignorance yesterday. I insulted you and your species because I believed we were better. I threatened you because I thought you were harmless. I was wrong on both counts." Cole nodded slightly but said nothing. "I watched the footage from the Eternal Victory," she continued. "I read the reports from the Dracorath War. I understand now why the other delegates looked at me with pity after you left." "They were not wrong to pity you," Cole said. "You made a mistake that could have had serious consequences." "Could have," Acelara frowned. "You mean it will not?" Cole turned back to the window. For a long moment he watched the stars in silence. "Let me tell you something," he said finally. "Something that is not in any file, something I have never told anyone." Acelara listened. "After the war ended, I was offered everything. Medals, promotions, political power. Earth wanted to make me a symbol, the soldier who broke the Dracorath, the hero who saved humanity." His voice was flat, empty. "I turned it all down. I asked for one thing only, a quiet assignment somewhere far from Earth, Somewhere I would not have to see people looking at me with gratitude or fear. Somewhere I could try to forget. He raised one hand and pressed it against the cold glass of the window. Do you know why I chose this posting? Diplomatic attaché, basically a bodyguard for ambassadors, the most boring job in the military. Asilara shook her head. Because every day I spend here standing in corners at parties is a day I am not doing what I did to the Drakkarath. Cole's voice dropped lower. That man, the one who walked through the eternal victory for 18 hours, he is still inside me. He never went away. I just built walls around him. He looked at her then, and Asilara saw something in his eyes that made her cold. When you insulted me yesterday, I felt him wake up. Just for a moment, just a flicker, but it was there. The old calculation. How many guards between me and you? How many exits from the room? How long it would take? Asilara could not speak. That is what frightens me, Cole continued. Not you, not your threats. What frightens me is how quickly I went back to thinking like that. How easy it would be to let that man out again. He turned away from the window completely, facing her directly for the first time. You asked if there would be consequences for what you said. Here is my answer. No, there will not be, because I choose to be better than what I became during the war. Every single day I make that choice, even when people like you make it difficult. Asilara found her voice. Then you are not angry. I am tired, Cole said simply. Anger requires energy I do not have anymore. I spent it all 15 years ago. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside the window, a ship passed by. Its lights blinked against the darkness. I have a question, Asilara said quietly. About what you said in the hall, about the Drakkarath Emperor's children. Cole's face did not change. Ask. Do you regret it? The silence stretched out. Asilara began to think he would not answer. No, Cole said finally. That is the worst part. I know I should regret it. I know it was monstrous. Children should never pay for the sins of their parents. But when I think about my daughter, about the shelter, about the 6,000 civilians they killed, he shook his head. I cannot find regret, only emptiness. That is horrible, Asilara said softly. Yes, it is. That is why I asked you not to make me take off the mask, because the thing underneath does not feel horror. It does not feel regret. It just acts. And once it starts, it does not stop. Asilara understood then. She understood why this man had requested boring assignments, why he stood in corners at parties, why he looked so tired. He was not hiding from the galaxy. He was hiding from himself. What happens now? She asked. Cole almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Now you go back to the summit. You negotiate. You compromise. You treat humanity like equals because you have learned what we can do when we are pushed. And hopefully this is the last time you and I ever speak. And if it is not, then I hope it is under better circumstances. He paused. I am not your enemy, Your Highness. I do not want to be anyone's enemy. I just want to watch the stars and pretend I am the ordinary man I look like. Asilara did something then that surprised both of them. She bowed, not a diplomatic gesture, a warrior's bow, the kind the Velkhari gave only to those they truly respected. Thank you, she said, for your restraint and for your honesty. Cole bowed his head in return. Go make peace, Princess. It is better than the alternative, trust me on this. She left him there, watching the stars. The summit concluded 2 days later. Princess Asilara surprised everyone by proposing a compromise. The Vale Nebula Corridor would remain neutral territory, governed by a council of multiple species. Humanity would have a permanent seat on that council. The other delegates agreed quickly. They did not question the princess's change of heart. They simply accepted it and moved forward. Ambassador Thelios approached Asilara after the final session. You spoke with Cole, he said. It was not a question. I did. And what did you learn? Asilara thought for a moment. I learned that strength is not always what we think it is. Sometimes the strongest beings are those who choose not to use their power. Thelios nodded slowly. The humans have a saying, something about walking softly and carrying a large weapon. They would know, Usilara said. As the delegations prepared to leave, Usilara passed by Cole one final time. He was back in his corner, watching the crowds with those tired eyes. She stopped beside him. "Sergeant Major." "Your Highness." She gave him the Velkhari gesture of respect between warriors, a small nod, a brief lowering of the eyes. Cole nodded back. Nothing more was said, nothing more was needed. Usilara boarded her ship and returned to the Velkhari Dominion. She never spoke of Marcus Cole publicly, but she made certain that her intelligence services updated their files on humanity. The new assessment was simple. Humanity is not to be provoked under any circumstances. They are not prey. They are not primitives. They are something else entirely. And in the classified archives of a dozen civilizations, intelligence analysts added similar notes. They wrote about human endurance, human determination, human capacity for violence when pushed beyond limits. But mostly, they wrote about Marcus Cole, a tired old man who stood in corners at diplomatic functions, who watched the stars and tried to forget, who contained within him something that had broken the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known. The galaxy watched humanity after that. They watched carefully, respectfully. And they were very, very careful not to provoke them. Because now they understood the truth. Humans did not seek war. They did not want conquest. They just wanted to live their lives in peace. But when someone threatened their families, their homes, their children, they did not stop. Ever. Until it was finished. The galaxy remembered this lesson. The galaxy would not forget.